The Dharma, incomparably profound and exquisite, is rarely met with even in hundreds of thousands of millions of kalpas. We now can see it, hear it, accept and hold it. May we realize the true mind of the Tathagata. Today is the 6th day of this 7-day sesshin here at Mountain Gate in northern New Mexico in November 2020. Only a little bit more than 1 day left. If that causes you alarm, it's a good sign. Most important thing, of course, is regardless of what it does, to dig in even a little deeper. Because as Mitra-roshi often said towards the end of sesshin, in order to reach this depth of clarity, whether it feels clear or not to you, is not so relevant, because believe me, it is clearer. You would have to go through almost 6 more days of sesshin again. And yet here you are, having worked this far. So your power, your strength, your level of ability to deepen more rapidly and more completely is greater than it was on day 1. Take that to heart and use that strength. And make the most of sesshin. Earlier in sesshin, I spoke of the Sixth Patriarch in regard to the breakthrough koan before your parents were born. And I'd like now to give a little bit more information about this man who was responsible for significant spread of Zen practice in China. In Chinese, his name is Huineng. He's also called Ekadaishi in Japanese. And he was born, as you heard before, to a father who actually was an exiled government official, which meant that he was educated. You don't get into the government in China, or you should say you didn't get into the government in China in those days without examination. And this is an intellectual examination, and it's quite extensive. The Chinese historically have put great store in intellectual prowess. And in order to get a position in the government, you had to pass a rigid examination, perhaps more than one. And obviously, Huineng's father had done so. And he was high enough up that his political, let's say, ideas, loyalties, were not in accord with the ruling power structure. And so to keep him from causing trouble, he was exiled to a remote area of China. And there he married a local woman who was illiterate. His son was only 3 when he died. And in the Chinese culture of the day, when a child was about 4, they would start teaching him how to read and write. This happens also in Japan, actually. Kids start learning to read and write one of the, it's not an alphabet, but it's the equivalent of an alphabet. They have, actually, in Japan, they use 4 different written languages. And so it's one of the simplest ones and one of the most common ones that toddlers learn how to read and write. But because Huineng was only 3, he was a little bit younger than when his father would have actually started teaching him. And so he was illiterate. He grew up without knowing how to read and write, because his mother didn't know that either. And of course, in those days, there was no Social Security, there was no insurance of any sort. And so his mother had to fend for herself to survive and to help Huineng survive. And they did this by going into the forest and gathering firewood and selling it in the town or the village where they were living. And this is how he grew. He was 19 years old, I think it was, when he was taking a load of firewood to deliver to a client and heard an itinerant pilgrim chanting the Diamond Sutra. And the particular part of the Diamond Sutra that this man chanted was this: arouse the mind that abides nowhere. Arouse the mind that abides nowhere. And that actually is a koan, an advanced koan in the Rinzai system. And at that, he had an awakening experience, and it was apparently quite a deep awakening experience. And he asked the pilgrim what he was reciting and where he had learned it, and was told that he had been at the Fifth Patriarch's temple, and the Fifth Patriarch had encouraged everyone to memorize that sutra and to recite it regularly. And that is still encouraged in certain countries, in Tibet, or in Tibetan Buddhism, I should say, and still in some of the Buddhist temples in China as well. It's a very short sutra, and it speaks of deep wisdom. At any rate, serendipitously, or because of his good karma, someone came up with enough money to donate to the cause of supporting Huineng's mother, so that he was free to leave and go to the Fifth Patriarch's temple. Now, a little bit of a background too. I mean, the fact that his father died when he was 3 and suddenly he was thrown into a very different lifestyle had to have impacted him at a very young age. The masters that we know of, for example, Dogen, whose mother died when he was 8, often had, or usually had, something major like that, the death of a parent, an upheaval in the family that motivated them to search beyond the ordinary. And so he must have been searching as a young child, and he had plenty of time out in the woods to keep questioning, to keep wondering what was going on. What was life? What is death? What does it mean to be alive? And so he was ripe when that pilgrim recited that particular statement: arouse the mind that abides nowhere. This is actually our practice. We are working to become aware in a way that we're not clinging to anything. Arouse the mind that abides nowhere. So he went to the Fifth Patriarch's temple, and of course he had to have walked. And he grew up in the South, which was the backwoods back then, and had to walk for a very long time to get to the Fifth Patriarch's temple. And I'm sure that he was continuing to practice in his own way through that travel. And he arrived at the Fifth Patriarch's temple. The Fifth Patriarch basically interviewed him and unlike the koan that we spoke of yesterday, where have you had your breakfast? Yes, then go wash your bowls. The fifth patriarch asked him what he was doing there, what he wanted. And he said, I came to become Buddha. And the fifth patriarch testing him, checking him to see where he's really coming from and how deep he might have been in making that statement, said, you think you can become Buddha? You uneducated guy from the hinterlands? What makes you think you can realize Buddhahood? And Huineng quite quietly responded, although there is north and south, in the Dharma, there is no north and south. And that made the fifth patriarch recognize that he had seen something deep. Form is emptiness, and emptiness is form. And because he wasn't ordained, and because he was a brand newcomer, he sent him off to work hulling rice out in the back part of the temple. Chinese temples in those days were enormous affairs with 1,000, 2,000 monks and their slaves, because some of them had slaves, if you can believe that, in the old days, as well as there were lay people as well who came to support the temple. And so it was quite a thronging place. There was a coterie of monks, actually ordained people. And again, they would have been maybe 1,000, 1,500, 2,000. There are even stories of masters' temples where there were 3,000 monks in residence. That must have been quite a challenge for the master to teach all those people. And those men, and they were all men, were spending their days in the zendo, doing meditation, while everybody else was out doing whatever work, working the fields, because there were fields. And this is where the slaves came in, by the way, and doing everything to provide the food, raise the food, provide the food for these monks, so that they could simply dedicate their time to coming to awakening. And as anywhere, there was an elitist sense about the monks. Some of the monks were simply dedicated to practice, and there were others who I'm sure were very invested in the fact that they were ordained. And there's a real pecking order in the ordination system in China, so that would have enhanced it. But Huineng did his work all day long, standing on this great, I never can remember which is the mortar and which is the pestle, but there was a hole in the ground where you put the rice, the unhulled rice, and then there was this hammer situation, rather enormous, such that he had to stand on it to make it work. And in fact, because he was not that big and heavy a person, apparently he had to tie a rock around his waist to add the weight necessary to be able to make the thing work. It still exists to this day, by the way. And so he kept on doing. And after 8 months, the fifth patriarch decided to check up on this guy and see where he was in his practice. And he made the rounds. The fifth patriarch made the rounds of the temple outside and inspecting things and so on, and came to Huineng's place and asked him if the rice was hulled yet. And that should not have had that astringent tea before I came here. And that was the same way of asking as in that koan, have you had your breakfast yet? And Huineng said, yes, but it still remains to be sifted. In other words, I have understood, but I need clarification. I still have some questions. And so the Fifth Patriarch indicated that he should come to his room in the middle of the night, and he would help him clarify it. In the meantime, the Fifth Patriarch was getting on in age and feeling like it was time to name a successor. And in order to find out about this, he devised this system. And it was to ask everyone in the temple to write a poem expressing their mind state, expressing the degree of awakening that they had. And this is actually something that is done at Sogenji as well, not for the purpose of defining a successor, but every year at what's called Toji Toya, which is at the winter solstice, there's a celebration. And during that time, we're all asked to write a poem. And then we present it during this celebration, and the Roshi makes comments on it. This has been classically done in Japan for centuries, basically, having probably come down from the same event at the Fifth Patriarch's temple. The monks declined to write a poem because they all figured that their head monk, Shinshu, would naturally get the patriarchy, and so they didn't want to provide any competition for him. They were supporting him instead, and so Shinshu was beside himself because he knew he did not have the depth of awakening that would be really essential for teaching. And that is to his credit. He wasn't eager to receive the bowl and the robe. He felt like he needed to do more work. And this is quite admirable. That says that he had some level of insight. So there was a hall in the Fifth Patriarch's temple where they were going to paint pictures of the Buddha's life. And that hadn't happened yet, but the wall had been prepared. And so Shinshu decided he'd sneak in at midnight and write a poem. And then if the Fifth Patriarch saw it and felt like it was worth something, then he'd admit that he was the one that had written it. Otherwise, it would just go down as an anonymous poem. So he did. And he talked about polishing. The mind is a mirror bright, and you have to polish it to keep dust from alighting on it and obscuring it. And somebody is not muted. If you could make sure that you mute yourself, please. Thank you. At any rate, the Fifth Patriarch did see it and recognized it for what it was, decent, but not deeply enlightened. But he said, this poem is worth reciting, and suggested that all the monks memorize it and recite it. And so at some point, one of the monks was somewhere near Huineng's rice hulling position and was reciting the poem. And Huineng, of course, recognized that it didn't have the depth of awakening, and asked about it. And it was told that the master had asked the monks to write a poem expressing their level of awakening. And so he said, well, let me, show me this poem. I would like to venerate it. And he was led to the place, and then asked someone else who was visiting the temple, I think it was a government official, to write a poem that he would recite. And the government official was sort of surprised, because Wen-ning certainly dressed like and behaved like somebody who'd grown up in the boondocks, and said, "You?" And he said, "Please." And so he did offer this poem. There is no mirror. The mind is not a mirror. So where is there dust to a light? And this is a deep expression that is also spoken of in the Diamond Sutra. And it is an understanding that each of us can awaken to. And when we awaken to this understanding, there's an amazing sense of freedom. We are suddenly able to recognize that we do not need to be tied up in the bounds of our assumptions and our ideas about how we are in particular and how things are in particular, but rather we can open to the profound truth of reality and see things clearly without attachment. And in seeing them clearly without attachment, we are able to respond to circumstances clearly and effectively, by the way, rather than knee-jerk reacting to them. So the Fifth Patriarch heard the commotion around this, because the monks were gathering and saying, "Oh my God, look at this one. This is so much deeper." And he apparently took off his shoe and rubbed it off the wall and said, it just is what it is. No, don't worry about it. This other poem is one that you should use as a model of practice. And then that's when he went and asked the sixth patriarch to come and meet with him late in the night. And he held up his robe so that nobody could see who was in the room with him, and was able to answer Wen-ning's questions to clarify his understanding, and gave him the robe and the bowl, with the admonition that he was not to pass it on, knowing that there was going to be potential for bloodshed, given how things were back then in China. He said it's too much of a hot potato, so you're not to pass it on. And by the way, you should get the heck out of here, because as soon as the monks find out that I've transferred it to somebody, they are going to come in hot pursuit, and your life will be in danger. So Wen-ning took off, and then you know the story about being pursued, and how Monk Myo, the former general, caught up with him and couldn't lift up the robe and the bowl when he found it, and asked for the teaching instead. And then when Wen-ning said, after they did some zazen, "When you were pursuing me, thinking of neither good nor evil," and that is a major cue. Thinking of neither good nor evil. Arouse the mind that abides nowhere. Thinking of neither good nor evil, so present, so at one with what was going on in each moment, that there is no thought of good or evil. There is no thought of me liking this or not liking this. Arouse the mind that abides nowhere. And had the awakening. And that's the source of our breakthrough koan. Show me your face before your parents were born. So Huineng continued on. Monk Myo went back and told the others that they were on the wrong trail. And so Huineng was free to continue on. And he did. And he closeted himself for 15 years, basically. He did not advertise. And this again attests the depth of his awakening. He had felt no need to advertise himself. If we feel a need to say, oh, well, I've had a kensho, then it's not been very deep. And that's something to be careful about. It means that we need to do more work. So he served hunters, and it was said that they had him working their traps and also cooking for them. And he wrote that he put vegetables in with their meat, and he would eat the vegetables when he was cooking and leave the meat for them, not wanting to hurt. And also he would release caught animals from the traps as well. So for 15 years, he went along like that. And then one day he heard about a teaching. And there's another koan too that comes forth from this one. Even today in Japan, when there's going to be a teisho, there's a flag that is posted outside the main gate of the temple to let people know so that they could come in and listen. And so it was that there was a flag outside a temple, and Huineng went to visit the temple to hear the talk and found the monks arguing about the flag, whether it was the wind that was causing the flag to flap or whether the flap was happening from the wind, from the flag. Which was it? Was the flag moving or was the wind moving? And there was the deep response from Huineng, gentlemen, your veritable minds are moving. And at that, the master of the temple recognized that this was an unusual man, and he had heard that the Sixth Patriarch was somewhere around and asked him if he was that person, and he admitted that he was, and so he was asked to teach. And I'm going to share today a bit of that teaching. This is on prajna, or wisdom. Prajna is considered transcendental wisdom, and I'm reading from a very old book that combines the Diamond Sutra and the Sutra of Huineng. It was translated by a Chinese gentleman and a Westerner, a Britisher, Evans Wentz, and no, he was doing the foreword. A.F. Price, and the Chinese gentleman is Wang Mulam. And it's still the major translation, the Wang Mulan translation. It seems to be quite good. It appears to be quite on target. So, next day, Prefect Wei asked the Patriarch to give another address. Thereupon, having taken his seat and asked the assembly to purify their mind collectively, in other words, to do some zazen first, and to recite the Mahaprajna Paramita Sutra, he gave the following address. Learned audience, the wisdom of enlightenment is inherent in every one of you. The wisdom of enlightenment is inherent in every one of you. This is something that we Westerners, being raised to learn all about what's wrong with us and not so much about what is right with us, come into Zen practice almost inherently with a sense that, oh, this can't be true, really? The wisdom of enlightenment is inherent in me, and yet it is. It simply needs to be uncovered. And with practice, with Zazen, gradually it is uncovered. And the thing that is a little bit sobering about this uncovering is that in order to uncover something, let's say, for example, in a hotel, once many years ago when we were on our way to Thailand to live in Chiang Mai, and we ended up in a hotel in Chicago for various different reasons. There was a major snowstorm, and we were delayed in our travel. Everybody was trying to stay in hotels in Chicago back then because nobody could get out. And so the hotel that we finally found a room in had actually opened up a very old wing, and all the furniture had been covered up with sheets to protect it from dust. And it's like that. It's like we're covered with these sheets to protect ourselves from, theoretically, from pain and suffering, although they don't do much of a job. And so as we uncover, we take off the sheets, we take off the protective covering, we begin to see through where we're caught. And that's not always a pleasant experience. We see where we are caught in greed, anger, and delusion. And it's a very sobering aspect of practice. On the good side of it, it is humbling. On the other side of it, if we are not aware of what it's really about, we can feel like the practice is not working and we're just getting to be worse people and we quit. I remember a friend of mine talking about her brother who was also doing Zazen at the Rochester Zen Center. And one day he just marched out of the Zendo and said, I don't know what I was doing in there, but it wasn't Zazen. And he never went back, which is sad. Because if we're willing to see where we're caught, then the world is open. We can let go. We can become free of it. It takes work, but my goodness, how much better that than staying caught and continuing to drag ourselves through suffering and create suffering for other people as well. To continue. It is because of the delusion under which our mind works that we fail to realize that ourselves, and that we have to seek the advice and the guidance of enlightened ones before we can know our own essence of mind. You should know that so far as Buddha nature is concerned, there's no difference between an enlightened person and an ignorant one. What makes the difference is that one realizes it, while the other is ignorant of it. Now, let me talk to you about Mahaprajna Paramita so that each of you can attain wisdom. Maybe it would have been better to say, uncover that wisdom. Learned audience, those who recite the word prajna the whole day long do not seem to know that prajna is inherent in their own nature. But mere talking on food will not appease hunger. And this is exactly the case with these people. We might talk on shunyata, which is the void, for myriads of kalpas, but talking alone will not enable us to realize the essence of mind, and it serves no purpose to the end. So it's interesting. I received a request from someone living far away to be able to ask some philosophical questions. And I will respond to the request after sesshin, but practice is not about asking philosophical questions. It's about letting go and tuning into the sense of needing to know the answers, not to philosophical questions, but to who are we? What are we? What is life? What is death? Why is there suffering in the world? In that way, we can become free if we pursue it deeply enough. The word Mahaprajna Paramita is Sanskrit and means great wisdom to reach the opposite shore. of the sea of existence. What we have to do is to put it into practice with our mind. Whether we recite it or not doesn't matter. Mere reciting it without mental practice may be likened to a phantasm, a magical delusion, a flash of lightning, or a dewdrop. On the other hand, if we do both, then our mind will be in accord with what we repeat orally. And there you have the instruction for working on the koan. We recite the koan briefly to bring up the perplexity that it expresses. And then we sink beneath the words to search through that perplexity for the response, for the answer. Our very nature is Buddha. And apart from this nature, there's no other Buddha. What is Maha? Maha means great. The capacity of the mind is as great as that of space. It is infinite, neither round nor square, neither great nor small, neither green nor yellow, neither red nor white, neither above nor below, neither long nor short, neither angry nor happy, neither right nor wrong, neither good nor evil, neither first nor last. Arouse the mind that abides nowhere. All Buddhas are void, all Buddha lands are as void as space. Intrinsically, our transcendental nature is void, and not a single thing can be attained. And that is the essence of the Diamond Sutra. It is the same with the essence of mind, which is a state of absolute void. Learned audience, when you hear me talk about the void, do not at once fall into the idea of vacuity, which is, it's awkward, this term void, because we can assume it means blankness, nothingness, but it doesn't, it's rich. Because this involves the heresy of the doctrine of annihilation. It is of the utmost importance that we should not fall into this idea, because when a person sits quietly and keeps his mind blank, he will abide in a state of voidness, of indifference, which sounds like that cave of dead sitting that Hakuin inveighs against. Learned audience, the illimitable void of the universe is capable of holding myriads of things of various shapes and form, such as the sun, the moon, the stars, mountains, rivers, worlds, springs, rivulets, bushes, woods, good men, bad men, dharmas pertaining to goodness and badness, deva plains, hells, great oceans, and all the mountains of the Mahameru. Space takes in all these, and so does the voidness of our nature. We say that the essence of mind is great because it embraces all things, since all things are within our nature. Since all things are in our nature. And science is beginning to realize that. Consider that. Yes, it looks like this is solid. It's a concentration of energy that will dissolve upon death. But energy cannot be lost according to the laws of physics. It can only be transformed. In another koan, the monks asked the master, "Where will you go when you die?" And the master said, "I'll be a buffalo at the bottom of the mountain, a water buffalo," since this was Asia. Meaning he will be there to support and work in whatever way is appropriate. How we die will make a difference in what happens with that concentration of energy. And so to become as clear and let go as possible will make that trajectory one that doesn't bring us into a bad place. But we're not going to get into that right now. Learned audience, the illimitable void of the universe is capable of holding myriads of things of various shapes and forms. And you heard the whole long list. Space takes in all these, and so does the voidness of our nature. We say that the essence of mind is great because it embraces all things, since all things are within our nature. When we see the goodness or the badness of other people, we're not attracted by it, nor repelled by it, nor attached to it, so that our attitude of mind is as void as space. In this way, we say our mind is great. Therefore, we call it Maha. Arouse the mind that abides nowhere. This is our fundamental nature. Extending the out breath helps us let go. Using the innate curiosity, perplexity that has brought us to practice to begin with enhances that. And as we continue doing this practice, gradually we do let go more and more and more. It's not necessarily perceptible, but as time goes on, we find ourselves more likely responding to situations rather than reacting to them. We find ourselves doing things differently, a little bit more let go. At the same time, we find ourselves with a much clearer view of where we are caught, and hopefully the motivation to let that go then. This is our wondrous practice, and it is so amazing and so miraculous to be able to do it and to be able to come to sesshin where we can concentrate on doing it. This is amazing. So keep going. Just keep going. Have faith that it's working and it will be worth it to continue. Thank you for listening. We'll stop now and recite the 4 vows.